Ever do cleans. It's not a good. And I don't like deadlifts.
Don't like deadlifts?
No, what are you doing it for? Think about it. It's a stupid movement. What are you doing? You gonna pick somebody off the ground? What does it help? Your lower back? Why you need your lower back strong?
Your legs, right?
Beg your pardon?
Your legs?
What about your legs?
It's supposed to strengthen your legs?
No, it doesn't strengthen your legs.
No.
Think about it. You're bending down. What they say it strengthens your hamstrings.
You don't do any deadlifts, like no single deadlifts?
No! Good Lord.
Really?
What?
That's the worst thing you could do.
Really?
Think about it. We're from Earth. Think about it.
No.
So you grabbing weight, picking it up as much as you can sometimes.
Yeah.
The risk outweighs the reward. You pull something, you're done for your rest of your life.
Hey guys, what's going on? This is Dr. Matt Wenning at winningstrength.com. Today's video is kind of a small attack against a guy named John Brown. Now, we might know John Brown today as the father of Amon St. Brown that plays for the Lions and Equanius St. Brown that are both receivers in the NFL. And it came to my attention that one of my followers sent me a video on how John Brown was against doing deadlifts and power cleans for the sake of playing power sports such as football. And it's an interesting topic because as you read through, as I first read through a lot of the different comments on this particular post, I started seeing that a lot of people were agreeing with them. And without going into too much detail, and just kind of absorbing what other people were saying, I started to get an idea that a lot of people are scared of power cleans and deadlifts. And in some cases, rightfully so. For a lot of us here in the United States, we have strength conditioning programs, we have weight training classes, we have personal trainers, and a lot of which may or may not know the proper deadlifting technique or power cleaning technique, and furthermore, may not know the right exercises in order to prepare yourself for proper deadlifting and power cleans. So it only becomes common that a lot of people don't really want to or utilize deadlifts or cleans. I'll get to the reasoning of why I think that they're needed here in a little bit. But first, let's go into John Brown's history because this is interesting. John Brown was born in 1966, so that makes him 13 years older than me, which means he's about 57. He had an impressive physique in the early 80s. But what's interesting is that as he's gotten older, which he's close to 60 now, he's pretty banged up and has hardly any muscle anymore, which isn't uncommon for that age, but I think is very common for a lot of the things that we'll get into in the video here pretty soon on some lifestyle habits that I think might have caught up with him when he was later and then started to overshadow some of his genetics that both him and his son have. I think some of the things that we have to get into is things that I agree with John Brown first. One, if you listen to a lot of his podcasts when he talks either overseas or in town or, here in the United States, he was a big advocate of sleep. So he talks on podcasts, whether it's true or not, of sleeping 11, 12, and sometimes 13 hours a day. Now, this is something that we share a lot of similarities with because in my top level training, I was also sleeping at least 10, 11, or 12 hours a day as well. But there's some mix-ups on this stuff, but I want to get into that later. The next thing he believed in, and whether he's trying to just be a hard ass or not, is he didn't believe in using straps, which I'm also a huge proponent of, meaning that if you can't lift it with your hands, the rest of your body probably shouldn't be lifting it either. So I'm in a total agreement with that. The other big thing that I'm in agreement with, and that he says it on his own podcast he's being interviewed on, is that he's gifted, and that when he was a kid, that everybody wanted him to take his shirt off so they could look at his muscles as a child. So that automatically tells you that his genetics are probably not of what average people are going to have, right? He talks about never dieting, eating hot dogs for contest preps, and also eating a shitload of candy. So show me some people that eat a boatload of hot dogs and candy and have a professional bodybuilding type physique, and I'm going to show you close to next to zero, which completely counteracts almost all of his thought processes on you have got to know something to be a professional bodybuilder. Well, in my personal opinion, in Mr. Brown's case, you didn't have to know a whole lot if you're genetically already super lean, can eat whatever you want, and then you're training almost like high intensity sets till failure and supersets constantly and pretty much grow from anything. He also says this about his sons, about how lean and muscular they are without even trying, and how they could walk on a bodybuilding stage and compete right now. So I think that comes down to a point of, okay, there are a handful of things I agree with here, but we're dealing with a different level of genetics that most people do not have. Again, for me, for example, when I was a kid, I had a little bit above average genetics. I just had an extreme work ethic. I think it holds true as well that length of career is also one of those other major factors. From what I could gather, John Brown was only a great bodybuilder from around 2 to 4 years. That tells me that as soon as his genetics ran out of time, his body's ability to progress halted because of his poor training accolades. But let's get into what I don't believe and what I think are some of his major mistakes. If you listen to a lot of his talking, he doesn't believe in overtraining. That is a huge red flag in almost every professional strength conditioning coach and every person that has studied strength conditioning or high power output. Fatigue is a huge factor and is also one that is very difficult to overcome no matter how much you eat or how much you sleep. We have to start thinking in maximal effective or minimal effective dosage. This means that most people think training to maximum is the only way to grow, when in reality, training minimal effective dosage allows your body to reset and recover. The Russians called this CAR, C-A-R, and this is your anabolic reserve. So if you tap into this anabolic reserve too extremely, your body will go into an alarm stage and it's not going to try to put on muscle, it's just going to try to survive. The next big thing that I think we have to look at is that he believes that people that don't take steroids need to work out harder than people that do take steroids. Well, I think we can all kind of figure out that if you're taking anabolic steroids, your body's anabolic system is going to be much more high drive. It's going to be able to recover much easier, and it's probably going to be in a much more optimal state to put on muscle. If you're drug-free and you're overtraining, the symptoms of overtraining and the repercussions of overtraining are obviously going to show up very, very consistently and very hard to work around, which might be part of his reason of why he was in such a short career as a pro bodybuilder. The next thing that I found that I thought was really interesting listening to him talk, because I did my research on this guy, is that he trained every muscle group 3 times a week. This, to me, is complete insanity. We've known since the 70s from the Russian texts and the other books that extreme training needs 72 hours of recuperation in order for us to hit super compensation. So for this to happen, you're going to be constantly in a rut, not digging yourself out, unless you have superior genetics. So again, training every muscle group 3 days a week sounds to me like you're either masking that with drugs or you're massively overtraining and could have got a lot more out of a lot less. The next big thing is I find it interesting that he talks about doing bent over rows with a barbell with 6 plates on the bar, which is extremely heavy and is against deadlifts. Now, for me, in the field for a very, very long time, doing things of this nature with possibly terrible technique, when if you listen to him talk, he says, sometimes it's just getting through the workout, which means probably a lot of those reps got really sloppy and really bad form. I've seen just as many people hurt their lower back doing bent over rows with ultra heavy weights as I probably have doing deadlifts. Why? Well, it's pretty simple. In the bent over row, you stay bent over the whole time. You never stand completely up. So your body's always in a bad position for spinal flexion. So as you get more tired and you have to stay leaned over to do the exercise, you're going to get more and more wear on those smaller muscles in your lower back, middle back, and upper back, causing spinal flexion, therefore causing disc and other types of back issues. So I find it interesting that he's a huge proponent of doing bent over rows with ultra heavy weights, but doesn't necessarily like to deadlift. So I think that kind of throws the lower back and back injury thing completely out of context 100%. That comes back into the next thing that we talked about. If you Listen to what he's talking about with a lot of these supersets and burning yourself completely out the first 1 and 2 sets. And then that's when the real work starts. My question is, how does the real work start when you're already so fatigued that probably your technique is bad? And that's where I think that you get into this understanding of you're going to use exercises that are going to be so fatiguing that you're going to have poor technique. You may be better off getting more rest and actually doing the exercises correctly. So although this sounds amazing and it sounds hardcore and it sounds like early 80s Mike Mincer crazy shit, in reality, what you're looking at is you're looking at a dad that trained in an era where, 1, they didn't know a whole lot, 2, was massive overtraining, 3, I highly doubt that somebody's going to make it to a Mr. Olympia or a Mr. America or Mr. Universe level without taking anabolic steroids. And number 4, we're already dealing with somebody with superior genetics that actually cuts up for shows eating hot dogs and candy. I don't think you would find guys like Jay Cutler or other great bodybuilders telling you that same advice. What's interesting now is that Dorian Yates is about the same age, maybe just a little bit older than Mr. Brown here. And how much better does he look? Only training 4 days a week, total, not every body part 3 times a week. Still has maintained quite a bit of muscle mass, even in his retirement, and not lifting very heavy, which tells me that he understood the difference between sarcoplasmic and actin and myosin hypertrophy, which are completely different areas. One stays forever or for a long time. The other one comes and goes, which is what we can see in this picture of him now. So again, I am 100% fan of everybody having an opinion, but in my personal understanding of training for the last 30 years with multiple world records, we have to be careful listening to bodybuilders that are naturally ripped and cut up on hot dogs and candy. We probably should be listening to people that have doctors in the fields, world records in actual performance, and people that start to look at training as an entire 360-degree picture. Are deadlifts good for everyone? The answer is no. But people can utilize a lot of the exercises that build up the deadlift. And when you do so with enough patience, deadlifting can become some people's best friend and best way to put on muscle and increase their sports performance, let alone power cleans. So this is Dr. Matt Wenning at WenningStrength.com. I hope this video has cleared up a couple of little things, and I want you to understand that I agree with some of the things that Mr. Brown is talking about.